The clinking of crystal glasses died the second. My mother slid the thick legal folder across the mahogany dining table. It was my 34th birthday dinner. But the grand dining room of our family's historic Charleston estate felt exactly like a tribunal. The air in the room grew so thin I could barely draw a breath. My brother Preston stared at his expensive porcelain plate and refused to meet my eyes. My mother tapped a perfectly manicured nail against the heavy parchment paper. It was a quitclaim deed. She demanded my signature right then and there to completely surrender my legal rights to the $4,500,000 property. Preston's flashy technology startup was rapidly suffocating under massive debts. She desperately needed my inheritance to legitimize the fraudulent collateral he had used to secure his private equity funding. She leaned forward across the table, candlelight carving sharp shadows on her face, and her voice dropped to a low, poisonous whisper. She called my career as an escrow officer a mediocre joke. She called me a bitter, selfish spinster who cared more about holding on to a grudge than saving her own flesh and blood. Then she raised a trembling finger, pointed toward the towering oak doors of the foyer, and demanded I get out of her house. The rest of the extended family sitting around the table remained perfectly still, anchored in their cowardly, suffocating silence. Not a single aunt or uncle spoke up to defend me. I pushed my heavy dining chair back. The wood scraped sharply against the polished floorboards, echoing through the dead quiet of the room. I left the unsigned legal document resting next to my untouched birthday cake. I turned my back on every single one of them and walked out into the sweltering, humid night. The heavy oak front door clicked shut behind me, severing me from the only family I had ever known. I walked down the long brick driveway to my car, gripping the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned completely white. My mother expected me to break down. She expected me to drive to a cheap hotel, order room service, and cry over her rejection until the sun came up. Instead, my mind shifted into a state of absolute, freezing clarity. I am a senior title escrow officer. My entire professional life is built on hunting down complex property fraud. I expose missing liens and trace hidden assets. People lie constantly, but the paperwork never changes its story. 3 months ago, my professional monitoring software flagged a bizarre, subtle anomaly. A notary stamp belonging to a wealthy woman in my mother's elite country club circle appeared on a routine property tax update for the estate. I dug deep into the county records, peeling back layers of shell companies. The truth was buried deep and yet undeniable. When my father passed away, he did not leave the massive house to my mother. He left the entire $4,500,000 property strictly to me in a protected survivor's trust. My mother had been living there illegally for years. She utilized a forged power of attorney to act as the trustee. She systematically bled the home's equity dry to fund Preston's lavish lifestyle and bail out his failing business ventures. Sitting in the driver's seat and watching the warm light spill from the dining room windows, the puzzle pieces snapped into a clear, horrifying picture. Tonight was not just a cruel birthday insult. It was a panicked, calculated ambush. The trust was only weeks away from legally maturing, which meant a mandatory financial audit was imminent. If I signed that quitclaim deed, I would retroactively erase her felony. She was not kicking me out to punish me for being difficult. She was kicking me out because she was terrified of me. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. They broke my heart years ago, draining every ounce of love I had to offer. But tonight, they had handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy their fraudulent empire forever. The law office smelled like bitter espresso and old leather. Camilla Hughes sat across from me, reviewing the forged documents with the sharp, predatory focus of a seasoned estate litigator. She did not offer me hollow sympathy or a tissue. She offered absolute legal strategy. We mapped out the financial wreckage spread across her desk. Preston had secured millions of dollars in private equity funding using the estate as his primary collateral. If he defaulted, the aggressive corporate lenders would rip the fake collateral apart, exposing the massive forgery to the world. My mother and brother were staring down the barrel of a devastating public scandal and federal prison time. A memory flashed in my mind. I was 18 years old, handing over my very first real paycheck, because my mother claimed family always contributes to the household. While Preston received a brand new luxury car the exact same week, she truly believed she owned my future simply by giving birth to me. To her, I was never a daughter with dreams and ambitions. I was a disposable asset, a biological bank account meant entirely to fund her golden child. I shoved the memory aside, forcing my focus back to the present. The past was dead, and I refused to engage in a useless screaming match. I refused to send angry text messages or demand a tearful apology. Camilla and I filed an ironclad eviction lawsuit alongside a massive civil fraud claim. We knew my mother aggressively dodged certified mail, returning anything from a law firm unopened to maintain her pristine bubble of denial. Camilla utilized a brilliant legal maneuver called service by publication. We ran the official court summons in the back pages of a small local newspaper, a cheap publication my mother would rather die than read. By ignoring the published summons for 30 days, she legally forfeited her right to defend herself in court. The trap was set. Legally binding, and completely invisible. 45 days bled into the sweltering South Carolina summer. My silence was absolute. My mother interpreted my lack of response as total submission. She genuinely believed I had crawled into a hole to lick my wounds and accept my exile. She began posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes on her social media profiles about the tragic necessity of setting boundaries with toxic children. The community offered her their blind, sycophantic sympathy, emboldened by her perceived victory. She went all out to host the Charleston Heritage Gala at the estate. It was her most critical social event of the entire decade. A massive display of wealth designed to cement her status among the country club elite and project an illusion of financial invincibility to Preston's incredibly nervous investors. Caterers hauled in crates of expensive champagne. Florists draped the grand staircase in thousands of white orchids. On the morning of the gala, while my mother was busy directing the string quartet in the ballroom, Camilla and I stood silently before a county judge. We presented the ignored newspaper summons, the undeniable forged power of attorney, and the original trust documents signed by my father. The judge reviewed the files, his expression hardening with every single page he turned. He did not hesitate for a second. He signed an immediate writ of possession. There was no 30-day notice to vacate. There was no grace period to pack her bags. The estate was legally mine, and my mother was officially a trespasser in my home. The trap was fully armed just as the first valets arrived at the party. The gala was at its absolute peak. Through the towering glass windows I watched the city's elite in diamonds and tuxes, flutes of champagne in hand. My mother stood on the grand staircase. She raised her crystal flute to deliver a triumphant toast to her legacy. The heavy mahogany doors swung open with a resounding crash. I walked into the foyer, flanked on either side by Camilla and the uniformed county sheriff. The string quartet stopped mid-note, bows frozen in place. The ambient chatter of 100 guests vanished. The room fell into a heavy, shocked silence. I kept my eyes locked entirely on my mother. The smug arrogance melted completely off her face, replaced instantly by raw, naked panic. Her hands began to shake. Champagne sloshed over the rim of her glass and stained her designer gown. He stepped forward and executed a legal lockout. He ordered everyone to vacate the premises immediately. My mother tried to laugh it off, adopting a high-pitched, frantic tone, assuring her wealthy friends it was just a minor misunderstanding with her confused daughter. When the sheriff commanded her to step outside, her voice cracked. She began to beg. She pleaded with the officers, her carefully practiced mask collapsing into plain desperation before her peers. Preston shoved his way through the stunned crowd, puffing his chest out to defend her honor. Camilla blocked his path and calmly handed him a thick manila envelope, a frozen asset notice. He was officially named as a co-conspirator in the embezzlement lawsuit. The blood drained from Preston's face as he realized his company was effectively insolvent and collapsing. The silent family members, the aunts and uncles who had watched my birthday execution without saying a single word, stared in absolute horror. Their cowardly silence had just cost them their financial safety nets and their pristine reputations. They were going down with the sinking ship. My mother was physically escorted out the front door, her expensive heels dragging against the brick pathway, publicly exiled from the only thing she truly loved. 2 weeks later, my mother was living in a cheap extended-stay motel on the desolate edge of town, utterly humiliated. But she didn't go quietly. She struck one last time. During the chaotic eviction, I had deliberately left a redacted financial statement sitting plainly on the kitchen island. It detailed a hidden trust account containing $1,200,000 of my father's liquid assets. She took the bait hook, line, and sinker. She colluded with her corrupt notary friend to forge a durable financial power of attorney. She drove across the state line into North Carolina, walking confidently into a wealth management branch to execute a massive commercial bridge loan against my trust. She thought she had outsmarted me. She thought she found the secret backdoor to save Preston's collapsing empire. But I knew her relentless greed better than anyone. I had already placed a permanent title lock and a hard federal fraud alert on my entire financial profile. The exact moment the teller scanned the forged documents into the system, the bank's anti-money laundering software triggered a silent alarm. The branch manager offered my mother a cup of gourmet coffee, inviting her into a plush office to finalize the interstate paperwork. He stalled her perfectly. She sat there, sipping her coffee, tasting victory. Then the glass door opened. Federal fraud detectives walked into the room. By crossing state lines to execute a fraudulent loan, she had escalated a local property crime into federal wire fraud. She was arrested right there in the lobby, her wrists locked tightly in cold steel. Simultaneously, a grand jury indicted the corrupt notary for her role in the forgery. Preston's investors pulled their funding instantly, triggering a catastrophic and highly public bankruptcy. The fraudulent empire collapsed under the publicity. I stood on the sprawling porch of the Charleston estate, listening to the quiet rustle of the ancient oak trees. The long war was finally over. Camilla snapped her leather briefcase shut, sliding the thick stack of federal indictments across the mahogany dining table. The court had handed down its final, devastating judgment. My mother was sentenced to 6 years in state prison, with the judge ordering full restitution of the stolen equity. Preston lost his company, his luxury home, and his entire industry reputation. The country club immediately erased my mother's name from their charter, and her former friends treated her memory like a highly contagious disease. Camilla looked up, her expression softening just a fraction. She told me her job was done, and the rest of my life was up to me. She walked out the front door, leaving me alone in the beautiful house my father built. A few months later, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. It was stamped directly from the state correctional facility. My mother tried to play her final hand from behind bars. The letter was an absolute masterclass in emotional manipulation, filled with desperate guilt trips, reminding me she gave me life, claiming she did everything solely to protect our family legacy. The old version of me would have agonizingly analyzed every single word, searching desperately for a tiny crumb of genuine maternal love. The new version of me simply dropped the unopened envelope straight into the paper shredder. The sharp blades whirred loudly, turning her toxic entitlement into meaningless confetti. I walked away without a second thought. My new life is completely unrecognizable from the chaos of my past. The estate is no longer a cold monument to social pretension. I regularly host weekend gatherings for the people who actually stood by me. The colleagues, mentors, and genuine friends who respect my hard boundaries and celebrate my successes. We fill the massive house with genuine, echoing laughter, not the nervous, calculated whispers of my traumatic childhood. The air in these rooms finally feels light and breathable. If you are listening to this story, you might be carrying the incredibly heavy burden of a toxic family. You might be told repeatedly that family is everything, that you must forgive horrific abuse simply because you happen to share the same bloodline. But true revenge does not come from screaming matches in the middle of a dining room. True revenge is found solely in the cold, unforgiving mathematics of the truth. Surviving a narcissistic parent requires you to mourn the mother or father you truly deserved, but never actually had. It is a terrible, necessary grief. I learned 3 absolute rules in the burning ashes of my family. Rule number 1. Silence is never a weakness. Silence is a weapon. When abusers push you, they desperately crave a reaction. They want you to scream and cry so they can point their fingers and call you crazy. Give them absolute silence, and they will eventually hang themselves with their own frantic desperation. Rule number 2. Bystanders are accomplices. Never forgive the people who sat quietly while you were being executed. The relatives who watch your abuse and tell you to just keep the peace are nothing more than cowards hiding behind the abuser's skirt. Cut them off just as quickly and just as coldly as you cut off the villain. Rule number 3. Blood is nothing more than basic biology. True family is defined exclusively by loyalty. You are allowed to evict toxic DNA from your life. Legally, emotionally, and permanently. You owe absolutely nothing to the people who try to destroy you for their own gain. If you are sitting at a table where your fundamental worth is constantly debated, stop arguing. Stop asking for crumbs from people who treat you like something to use and toss away. Stand up. Walk away. Start to face the whole truth. You have the power to make your own safe place. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me your story in the comments below. I know exactly the words you're shouting at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why didn't